A talent consigned to history, the best there never was. These words backlight Sonny Hayes and his return to F1 in Brad Pitt's movie of the same name. Words that fail to give a voice to the determination and struggle that Hayes goes through to return to racing in the first place, much less the F1 grid. A driver chasing a dragon and running from nightmares of a troubled past, Hayes' F1 dreams ended in the blink of an eye. But Sonny Hayes isn't real. These aren't the story, struggles, triumph, or tragedy of Sonny Hayes. Rather, they belong to a soft-spoken Ulsterman, who even from the start had his own dragons to chase. Martin Donnelly. Born in 1964 in Belfast, Martin Donnelly's childhood was one shaped by a world that, even by a young age, threatened to leave him behind. Only a few years earlier, his home of Belfast was plunged into the Troubles. Separated by peace walls and segregated from many other young boys who should have only been a few blocks' walk away, Donnelly found an escape in karting. It was on track where the walls that separated Catholics and Protestants broke down, where the young Donnelly could find peace and companionship in the people around him, their differences bridged by their love of racing. As the years rolled on, the Ulsterman honed his craft in karting. In 1983, he even stepped up to British F3 for a single race with someone who would become a vital figure in his life, his future F3000 team boss, Eddie Jordan. But it would ultimately be in 1986 when Donnelly finally made his full-time open-wheel debut and truly began his journey out of Belfast and towards the pinnacle of motor racing.
Naast Andy Wallace. Dan Martin Donnelly en Mauricio Sala. En daar waarachter Damon Hill.
Martin Donnelly entered the world of single-seater racing with a bang, winning 3 races in his debut year of F3 in 1986. While he would eventually finish third in the championship, his eyes were already set on a far greater target. By the 1980s, the Macau Grand Prix had cemented itself in the world of motor racing, with nearly all serious rookies taking part. It was on these streets that legends like Ayrton Senna caught the eye of their future F1 backers, footsteps in which Donnelly was eager to follow in. His first attempt at Macau ended in a frustrating DNF after he crashed his uncompetitive Swallow racing car, despite starting an excellent P7. However, it would be on his second attempt in 1987 where he would truly announce his arrival to the motor racing world.
In pole position was none other than Martin Donnelly from Great Britain with the Intersport Rod Toyota. Down into the first corner they come. It's Donnelly and Medina side by side. There was absolutely no stopping Martin Donnelly.
Racing a field of future F1 talents like Damon Hill and Jean Alesi, he would qualify his Toyota RT31 a stunning 2 seconds ahead of his teammate and over 3/10 ahead of P2 before driving a dominant race to win over 8 seconds ahead of second place. He followed this eye-catching performance with a real championship challenge in F3, only winning 2 races, but scoring consistent points, finishing third in the championship again behind future F1 drivers Bertrand Gachot and Johnny Herbert, while dominating his Swallow Racing teammate Niklas Schönström 61 points to 17. These results caught the eye of a big fish in the world of Formula 3000, Eddie Jordan. Already a championship winner in F3, he was looking to make the step up to Formula 3000 and wanted Donnelly to be his star driver. Thus, midway through the 1988 season, Donnelly was brought onto his first competitive junior team with EJ Racing.
A close tussle with Gregor Wojcik, but Martin Donnelly leads Pierluigi Martini.
It's Donnelly who's made that very rapid start, so up into second place comes Martin Donnelly, a tremendously rapid start from him.
Donnelly proved his talent immediately, winning on debut after a duel with future F1 drivers Marc Blundell and Pierluigi Martini. He would go on to never finish off the podium, taking another victory in the final round of the season, once again besting F1-bound drivers Eric Bernard and Olivier Griard for the win. Despite only taking part in 5 rounds, he finished third in the standings. However, it would be in a boardroom in Hethel, Norfolk, where Donnelly's future would be shaped. His victory at Macau the previous year had not gone unnoticed, and even as he prepared for the 1989 F3000 season, he was accepted as a test driver for the Lotus F1 team. The 1989 F3000 season, however, would not be what either Donnelly or Jordan envisioned. Despite taking pole at the second race in Vallelunga and consistently fighting at the front of the field, Donnelly would not finish a race until round 6, over halfway through the championship, where he would take the checkered flag in first. Instead of him, Jordan's new driver, Jean Alesi, would take the season by storm, eventually beating out favorite Eric Comas to the title. However, all of these struggles would be overlooked when a karting accident for the Formula One driver Derek Warwick allowed Donnelly, after 6 years of waiting, to get a call up to the grandest stage of them all.
Row 7 will be Stefan Johansson of Sweden in the second team Onyx, next to Martin Donnelly making his Formula One debut for the Arrows team. Eric Bernard.
In what would become one of the most important Saturdays of Donnelly's life, he arrived at the 1989 French Grand Prix to drive for the struggling Arrows team. Despite entering what was a team past its prime and placed against experienced teammate and multiple podium finisher Eddie Cheever, he shockingly outqualified his American teammate by nearly a second to place his Arrows A11 in P14, 9 places above Cheever and 2 above fellow F3000 driver Jean Alesi, who was driving a far more competitive Tyrrell. He would eventually finish the race in 12th, the last of the classified finishers, but this performance had drawn the eyes of Lotus team boss Peter Warr, and, one contract later, the boy from Belfast had finally secured his spot at the pinnacle of motorsport. Hopes were high heading into the 1991 Formula One season for both Donnelly and his new teammate, Derek Warwick, freshly signed from Arrows. The new Lotus 102 had been equipped with a new Lamborghini V12 engine, and with renewed backing from Camel Tobacco, team manager Rupert Mainwaring confidently claimed that the car would score 40 championship points across the season to come. However, there was trouble even before the season began. The once legendary Lotus team had been in desperate need of funding stretching back all the way to the 1980s. As a result, the Lotus 102 was very similar to the previous year's Lotus 101, but with the large and what would prove to be heavy and severely underpowered Lamborghini V12 in the back. To compensate for this, the car had been stripped of as much weight elsewhere as possible in pursuit of performance. Making matters worse, the car reused the central body, or tub, from the old Lotus 101. A piece which had been fitted to the short Satoru Nakajima and Nelson Piquet, whom the much taller Donnelly and Warwick had replaced.
Martin Donnelly in the Lotus Lamborghini is shaking his head. He can't get the car started even at the very beginning of the race, and he is out. Ayrton Senna with the McLaren, and that's Derek Warwick with broken rear suspension. Derek Warwick in the Lotus. His rear suspension breaks as he gets onto the brakes for that right-hander, and so Derek Warwick is out.
The issues of the car being overweight and underpowered quickly dispelled any hopes of fighting at the front, as both cars, despite the quality of their drivers, qualified a distant 19th and 24th at the opening round of the 1990 season. However, it would be during the second race at Interlagos that real problems would start for Donnelly. In free practice, after adding some downforce to the front of his car, one of the dampers holding his front wing in place came loose, and the wing partially disconnected from the car, scraping along the ground. He managed to control his wounded Lotus and eventually would race without incident on Sunday, but this issue was simply papered over by the cash-strapped team, not fixed. The rest of the season would continue to be a frustrating one for the young rookie. While he would consistently match or out-qualify Warwick, it would be the more experienced British driver who brought home Lotus's only points by mid-season, Donnelly coming tantalizingly close on a few occasions, but failing to score. As the second half of the season began, filled with more low-power circuits which would favor his underpowered car, Donnelly looked to turn a new leaf in his inaugural Formula One season.
But coming out of the Parabolica, we had drama. Warwick ran wide onto the grass, into the barrier, and then rolled back across the track, upside down, the car catching fire. And Warwick upside down on the track, but crawled out of that wreckage miraculously. It was unbelievable.
However, Lotus's tumultuous luck continued. During the Italian Grand Prix, while running just ahead of Donnelly, Derek Warwick's Lotus understeered off the last corner of the circuit, hitting the wall at 140 miles an hour. His structurally weakened Lotus disintegrated on its left side, and while Warwick eventually emerged unhurt, it seemed to be a matter of when, not if, a more serious accident occurred for the struggling team. Then came Friday, September 28, 1990, Jerez, Spain. Donnelly went into the weekend hoping to push for what would be his first points of the season. That morning, he had signed a new contract with Lotus. He would be their lead driver for 1991, partnered with promising Finnish rookie Mika Häkkinen. During first qualifying, Donnelly was thrashing his Lotus hard, vying for the best possible starting position. He briefly topped the timing sheets. The weather was temperate, sunny, and dry. Then, as he approached turn 14 at the fastest part of the circuit, the Lotus let go. A damper on the floor of the car at the front left failed, and he was sent hurtling into a concrete barrier. The impact, estimated at 42 G, split the car in two, sending splintered fragments of the chassis and bodywork, along with Donnelly himself, hurtling across the track. He came to a stop in the middle of the circuit, still strapped in his seat, helmet cracked open, not breathing. He suffered immense injuries, including lacerated organs, bruising to his brain, and 2 broken legs, his right leg especially mangled. Track marshals who arrived at the scene milled around, shocked by what they saw and unsure of what to do. All who watched the crash assumed Donnelly must be dead. Professor Sid Watkins, the FIA's medical delegate and a respected brain surgeon, quickly arrived at the scene and took stock of Donnelly's condition. Professor Watkins stabilized Donnelly, freeing his airways and removing his helmet, and the stricken driver was soon airlifted to the hospital in Seville for treatment before returning to the UK for more intensive and specialized care on the following Tuesday. As his body continued to react to the severity of his injuries, things went from bad to worse. His organs started to fail, he was placed into an induced coma, and a priest read him his last rites as he lay unconscious, slipping away. But Donnelly was, and is, a fighter. And after weeks in a coma, he woke up and faced the long and impossible road to recovery that lay ahead.
It's taken me a long time to get to Formula One. I fought hard to get there. So I'm determined that a city that lacks in isn't going to prevent me from doing it.
As he recovered, Donnelly began a months-long program of intense physical therapy. His right leg had been so badly damaged in the crash that, prior to major reconstructive surgery, doctors had almost amputated it. Donnelly had to relearn how to walk with what was essentially a new leg, and labored intensely to regain his stamina. He approached the immensely painful recovery with his characteristic tenacity, fighting to regain the fitness required to race in Formula One again. Unfortunately, that would never come to pass. In the midst of recovery, Donnelly's surgeon gave him the horrible news. His injuries were too severe. He would never drive a Formula One car again. After all of the struggle, all the pain, all the literal blood, sweat, and tears, it was over. The dream to become world champion, the first from Northern Ireland, had been crushed.
2 long years of painful rehabilitation had preceded this. The legacy of his terrible injuries remain. But this Vauxhall Nova Challenge event could help convince the sport that Martin Donnelly still had a racing future.
Donnelly's spirit, however, remained intact, and he continued to work hard to recover. 2 years after the accident, he made a brief return to competitive driving in the 1992 Vauxhall Nova Challenge, a rallycross event. Sporadic appearances across various club-level races and one-offs, including a drive in the British Touring Car Championship, followed. But a return to racing full-time was never on the cards. Donnelly instead turned to management, setting up Martin Donnelly Racing, or Team MDR, in 1992. The team has entered numerous lower-level Formula Series, from Formula Vauxhall and Formula Renault, all the way up to British Formula 3, experiencing success in every series they entered. Donnelly ultimately left his own team to be the racing director for Comtech Racing's team in the 3.5 World Series by Renault, winning the championship the first time out. He has also maintained a close relationship with Lotus, racing in and helping to manage the Lotus Cup UK, the Elise Trophy, and the Lotus Cup Europe, along with acting as an FIA steward at Formula One Grand Prix during the 2010s. So, what is Martin Donnelly's legacy? Is it one of on-track success? Let's revisit his career accomplishments. 3rd place in Formula 3 on 2 occasions, winning the Macau Grand Prix, winning on debut in Formula 3000, and being signed to Lotus F1. Certainly nothing to sneer at, but the accident prevents us from getting a clear picture of what kind of racer he was and what kind of career he would have matured into. However, the hypotheticals are truly fascinating and worth exploring. Donnelly's crash meant that his contract with Lotus for 1991 never came to pass, giving Johnny Herbert a chance to drive an F1 again following a stint at Benetton in 1989. Herbert's career was a successful one, with points at Lotus and Grand Prix victories for Benetton and Stewart later in the decade. It's not unreasonable to assume that Donnelly would have enjoyed a similar career path with similar success. However, the more interesting what-if is on the other side of the 1991 Lotus garage, Mika Häkkinen. While a point scorer for Lotus, he found his true home at McLaren, taking podiums in both winning races and winning 2 championships. Now, some of you might be shouting at your screen saying, Donnelly was no Häkkinen. I ask you to reconsider. Their junior careers are not dissimilar. It's impossible to know, but equally impossible not to wonder. So if Martin Donnelly's legacy isn't one of on-track successes, what is it? Some might argue it's the heightened awareness of safety that followed his accident. But nothing really changed in Formula One after his crash, not until that fateful and fatal weekend in Imola 4 years later. Others might say his legacy is now cemented in his influence on the F1 movie, but that seems rather shallow. No, Martin Donnelly's true legacy lies not in anything tangible, nor in anything you can see in a theater near you, but in his grit, his determination and pure will, his fighting spirit from early days in Northern Ireland, to his heroics in the junior formulas, to his impossible recovery from the most brutal crash F1 had seen in a decade, exemplifies everything you need to know about Martin Donnelly. His sheer will, not just to succeed, but to thrive, survive, and come back to the sport that almost claimed his life, is his true legacy. Many drivers have been tough, but only a rarefied few can claim to be as tough as Martin Donnelly. He showed us his strength perhaps most touchingly in 2011 at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. 21 years after doctors told him he would never sit in a Formula One car again, he did just that. Martin Donnelly, in his original race suit and helmet, got into the 1990 Lotus and took it for a lap of honor.